Somewhere in England, there is a hill so steep that truck drivers pull over just to check their brakes before they even start. One wrong gear, one moment of panic, and a fully loaded lorry can turn into a runaway weapon in seconds. For nearly 200 years, this road has broken brakes and ended careers. This is the story of Porlock Hill. Porlock Hill sits on the A39, a road that runs along the coast of Somerset, England. It climbs out of the small village of Porlock and heads up onto the wild open land of Exmoor. On paper, it looks like any other country road. In reality, it is the steepest A road in the entire United Kingdom. In some places, the gradient reaches 1 in 4. That means for every 4 feet you travel forward, you climb 1 foot straight up. A warning sign at the base spells it out plainly, so no driver can claim they were not told. The climb itself is short, less than 2 miles from bottom to top, but in that short stretch, the road rises about 1,300 feet. Most of that climbing happens in the first mile, where the road gains over 700 feet almost straight away. There are 2 hairpin bends on the way up, tight enough that a long vehicle has to take them slowly and carefully. Thick woodland lines the lower half of the hill, so drivers cannot see what is coming around the next bend. Higher up, the trees fall away and the road opens onto bare windswept moorland. It is beautiful. It is also brutal on machines and nerves alike. At the bottom of all this sits the village of Porlock itself, home to about 1,400 people, tucked between the coast and the steep rise of Exmoor. It is a quiet place, full of old thatched cottages, a few pubs, and a slow pace of life that feels far removed from the drama unfolding on the hill just outside town. For centuries, this small village has watched travellers arrive at the base of that climb and brace themselves before heading up. To understand why this hill became such a legend, you have to go back to a time before cars, before lorries, and even before a proper road existed at all. In the 1700s, the land west of Porlock was almost cut off from the rest of England. There was no real road, just rough tracks that flooded, crumbled, and disappeared in bad weather. The poet Robert Southey visited the area in 1794 and described it as feeling like the end of the world. That was not an exaggeration. Farmers, traders, and travellers all struggled to move goods and people through this stretch of coastline. This part of England was so remote that it worked its way into literature too. Around this same period, the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge was staying near Porlock while writing his poem Kubla Khan. An interruption he later blamed on an unnamed visitor. He simply called a person from Porlock. It is a small detail, but it says something important. Even the poets of the time saw this stretch of coastline as isolated, cut off, and hard to reach. By 1812, the local authorities had had enough. They were fined for failing to keep a proper road in this part of the country. And builders were finally brought in to construct a real route, up and over the hill. It took years of hard labour with hand tools to carve a path into the steep, rocky ground. The road finally opened in 1843, and its first real test came when a stagecoach successfully made the journey from Linton to Porlock. It worked, but just barely. Travelling this new road by stagecoach was an ordeal in itself. Coaches were usually pulled by 4 horses, but 2 extra horses were harnessed on before the climb began. Even then, passengers were often asked to get out and walk up the steepest sections to lighten the load. Going down was even scarier than going up. Drivers wedged a heavy metal drag against the wheels to slow the coach's descent, so the whole vehicle practically slid down the hill instead of rolling. Passengers held on tight and hoped for the best. Not long after the main road opened, a local landowner named Mr. Blathwaite decided the hill needed an alternative. He built a second route, a toll road, that climbed at a much gentler angle of 1 in 14. It was longer, winding through woodland for over 4 miles instead of charging straight up like the main road. Like the main road before it, this new route was dug out by hand, and a French engineer was brought in to help lay it out properly. Much of the labour was given to local workers who needed jobs after the Napoleonic Wars had ended. At first, almost nobody used the finished toll road. Horses could handle Porlock Hill just fine, so why pay a toll to avoid it? That only changed once cars started showing up on English roads and needed a way around the steepest sections. Here is the twist that matters most for anyone driving a truck. That toll road, built specifically as an easier alternative, still has a weight limit of 7.5 tons. A loaded delivery lorry, a haulage truck, or anything close to full size cannot legally use it, which means for almost 2 centuries, heavy vehicles have had exactly one option for reaching this part of Exmoor by road: Porlock Hill, or nothing at all. There has never been an easy way around it for the big rigs. That fact alone tells you everything about why this hill earned its fearsome reputation among professional drivers. Long before trucks existed, this route already proved how vital it was for moving heavy loads under pressure. In 1899, a fierce storm struck the coast near Lynmouth, and a ship was in serious trouble offshore. The local lifeboat could not be launched from its own harbour because the storm made the water too dangerous, so the crew made a desperate decision. They hauled the entire lifeboat overland by horse, up and over the steep terrain near Porlock Hill, all the way to Porlock Weir, where the water was calm enough to launch safely. It was an exhausting, dangerous effort, dragging a heavy boat across some of the harshest ground in the region during a storm, but it worked, and lives were saved. That story has stayed part of local memory ever since, a reminder that this stretch of land has always demanded serious effort to move anything heavy across it, boats included. The arrival of the motorcar turned Porlock Hill into something else entirely, a proving ground. On the 19th of August 1900, a man named Roger Fuller decided to settle a bet. Word had spread that a car could never beat a horse up a hill this steep. Fuller climbed into a 16-horsepower Napier automobile, and with a crowd gathered to watch, he raced a man on horseback to the top. The car left the horse behind almost immediately. Fuller reached the summit in 17 minutes, and just like that, the age of the horse on this hill was numbered. 6 years later, the first motorcycle made it up. In 1916, the first motor coach followed. Word of the hill's difficulties spread through the early motoring world, and it quickly earned a nickname among drivers and rally competitors, Terror Hill. That was not marketing talk. Early cars were far weaker than what we drive today, and many of them simply could not make it to the top without stalling, overheating, or sliding backward on the loose surface. Car makers began using Porlock Hill as a testing ground to prove their vehicles could handle the worst conditions British roads could offer. If a car could climb this hill without trouble, it could climb almost anything. In December of 1928, under strict supervision from the Royal Automobile Club, a driver for the Singer Car Company climbed and descended the hill 100 times in a row without stopping. The company was so proud of the result that they named a car after the village, calling it the Singer Porlock, turning a grueling endurance test into a genuine selling point. After the Second World War, truck manufacturers got serious about testing here too. Vauxhall and Bedford both brought their lorries to Porlock Hill and loaded them down with concrete blocks to simulate a full cargo weight. They wanted to know exactly how their vehicles handled the tight hairpin turns and the brutal incline under real working conditions, not empty and light. If a lorry could climb Porlock Hill fully loaded, it could probably handle almost anything else on the British road network. This hill was not just a scenic route, it was a stress test for the entire trucking industry. So what actually makes this climb so dangerous for a truck driver even today? Start with the gradient. A 1 in 4 slope does not sound like much until you are sitting behind the wheel of several tons of steel and cargo, feeling the engine strain just to keep moving forward. Going up, a heavy lorry can lose speed fast if the driver picks the wrong gear, and stalling out on a slope this steep is a nightmare scenario. Going down is worse. Gravity does not care how heavy your load is, it just keeps pulling. A driver who relies too much on the brake pedal on the way down is asking for trouble. Brakes work by turning motion into heat through friction, and on a normal hill, that heat has time to escape between uses. On a slope like Porlock Hill, there is no break in the action. The brakes are working constantly for nearly a mile straight, and the heat builds up faster than it can ever cool down. Once that happens, the brakes start to fade, meaning they simply stop working as well, right when a driver needs them most. A truck that cannot stop on a hairpin bend with a steep drop nearby is not a small problem. It is a life or death one. This is exactly why the smell of burning brakes has become part of Porlock's identity. Locals in the village will tell you they can smell it from vehicles that have just come down the hill, almost like a warning sign written into the air itself. It is such a well-known part of life there that people barely react to it anymore. For a truck driver, though, that smell is the sound of an alarm bell. It means the margin for error just got a lot smaller. Then there are the hairpin bends. On a normal hill, a driver can find a rhythm and settle into a steady pace. On Porlock Hill, that rhythm gets broken by tight turns that force a long vehicle to slow down dramatically, shift its weight, and then immediately deal with the steep grade again on the other side. A long trailer does not turn the same way a car does. The back end swings wide, and on a narrow road with the rocks on one side and a drop on the other, there is almost no margin for a mistake. A driver cannot see around these bends until they are already committed to the turn. Combine that with oncoming traffic on a narrow road, and there is very little room for anything to go wrong without real consequences. Experienced truck drivers who tackle steep hills like this one do not rely on hope. They rely on technique, learned the hard way over years behind the wheel. The first rule is simple. Pick the right gear before you start the climb or the descent, not halfway through it. Shifting gears on a slope this steep, especially with a heavy load, can cause a loss of momentum that is difficult or even dangerous to recover from. Drivers approaching Porlock Hill learn to drop into a low gear well before the road tips upward, giving the engine the pulling power it needs from the very first yard of the climb. Going downhill, the real skill is engine braking. Instead of pressing the brake pedal the whole way down, a skilled driver uses a low gear to let the engine itself resist the vehicle's momentum, controlling speed gradually instead of relying on friction brakes alone. This keeps the brakes cooler and ready for the moments when they are truly needed, like navigating a hairpin turn or reacting to something unexpected in the road. Riding the brake pedal continuously is one of the fastest ways to cause brake fade, and brake fade on a hill like Porlock can be catastrophic. Drivers also learn to respect momentum on the way up. Losing speed on the steepest section can mean the difference between reaching the top smoothly and grinding to an agonizing, engine-straining crawl that risks stalling completely. At the same time, going too fast into a hairpin bend with a heavy load risks a rollover on the tight turn. It is a constant balancing act between power and caution, speeding up just enough to keep the engine strong, then slowing down just enough to survive the next bend, repeated again and again by drivers who know this hill by heart. Veteran drivers often say the trick is never to be surprised by the hill, because Porlock does not forgive hesitation or panic. Every gear change and every steering input needs to happen before it is needed, not after. Because of just how demanding and unforgiving this road is, safety measures have been built directly into it.